Working in times of crisis and disaster, we meet people who are on different journeys. Some of them will be filled with fear, and some will be filled with hope. And hope's the only emotion that's stronger than that of fear. And I want to share with you one family's journey through both fear and hope. Boys, come and see this.
Isn't it great?
Can we swim in there?
Yeah, we can go swimming, yeah.
Go get it, Lucas.
The most scary bit for me,
And the water hit?
when I came up. And that was all on my own. And then I saw the two of you. I didn't feel so scared anymore. If Mummy and Lucas are on their own right now, I'm gonna keep looking for them.
One love,
I'm scared.
one life,
I'm scared too.
and it's one need in the night. One life
Thank you so much.
with each other, sister,
Lucas, go and help people. You're good at it.
Agda, Joseph, Morton.
You're looking for your family?
same. We get to carry each other, carry each
I'll look in all the hospitals and I'll look in all the shelters. I will find them, I promise you that.
These were the events that took me to Thailand. I'd spend several months leading Australian and international teams in the disaster victim identification. That is the attempt to identify those who have died. And in Thailand, what we know as a result of the Boxing Day tsunami, there was somewhere between 250 and 300,000 people who would lose their lives. And we recovered 5,395 souls who had perished in Thailand, and our job was to identify them and send them home. And this was and remains the world's largest disaster victim identification attempt that's ever been undertaken. Thousands bigger than 9/11, thousands bigger than anything that had been seen in this space before. In working in these areas, we're certainly presented with unique challenges. And I spent the last 2 years, I was employed by New South Wales Police working on an international secondment. And I spent the first 12 months working with Interpol in Lyon in France, looking at counter-terrorism. And my brief was to focus on what we call CBRN, which is chemical, biological, radiological, and nuclear threats. And basically, I wrote a paper for 12 months looking at what were the threats and trends and what the international forensic science community should do to meet those threats and trends. Following the initial 12 months, I was invited to stay, and I spent time working with the United Nations Office of Drug and Crime throughout Southeast Asia in a capacity building role around leadership and around counter-terrorism. And working in these spaces, one of the things that became very clear to me is that there is only so much contingency planning that you can do. And in the absence of that, what's required is leadership. Because we just can't hope that something won't happen. And in these areas, hope is not a plan. So to meet these challenges, we need to build strong teams and we need to have leadership. And in my experience, there's two types of leadership that exist within our organisation. There's positional leadership, which is clear. You look at the org chart of the organisation that you represent here today and you can see who's at the top and you can cascade down all the way through the org chart and see where everyone sits. But does that mean in challenging times that might be brought about by some type of crisis or downturn in the economy or even unprecedented growth, does that mean that the best decisions and your key leaders are only going to come from the top of the org chart? Because in my experience, true leaders are identified by their actions and their reactions. It's what people do, not the positions they hold, that really makes a difference. Now, when the Australians were invited across into Thailand to assist, there was no conditions imposed upon our deployment. But once we arrived, the Australians held every key leadership position in this international response. There was 450 forensic staff from around the world who came from 36 different countries. But the Australians held every key leadership position in those early days. And what was that about? What put us into those positions? Well, it wasn't something that we didn't arrive first. We didn't have the biggest team. We didn't have any greater skill or experience than many of the other countries that were there. And there wasn't this expectation, but it was what the Australians did that put us into those positions. We didn't lose more people than anyone else. As a country, we lost 25 people. The Germans lost 500. The Swedes lost 500. The Thais lost 2,500. Yet the Australians were running the entire operation. There are a number of key things. The first was that the Australians acted with speed. When there's an opportunity, when there's a gap within the marketplace, you know whoever moves first, whoever acts decisively, will hold that position of leadership. And that's what the Australians did. They moved first, and therefore so many followed the lead of the Australians. The second thing was to lead with sensitivity. We know that when we bring about change programs, when you're required to lead a change program, that it upsets people. Seth Godin, an author out of the States, talks about change, and he says, if you are not upsetting people, if you're not upsetting them, well, you're not bringing about change. So if we accept that when we implement change that people are going to be upset, what do we do to address those issues of resistance? And this is the second thing the Australians did well, was to lead with sensitivity. I'll give you an example of what that looks like. Imagine that you're in somewhere like Bali or Thailand or Japan, and you lose a member of your family to one of the disasters there. There is an overwhelming desire to find them, to have them identified and bring them home so you can bury them according to your faith and your belief. In the early days, people walked throughout that Sangla hospital in Denpasar looking for their loved ones. There were 202 bodies recovered after the Bali bombings. Sadly, many of them were not intact. They were taken to Sangla Hospital, and the mortuary at Sangla had a capacity for 6. We had 202. They were laid out on the walkways in those early days. In Thailand, the bodies were taken to a temple called Wat Yan Yao. And it's a beautiful temple, and I arrived at this temple and walked in through the gates, but all I could see was the decomposing bodies of 3,500 people. Now, in those early days, the families walked throughout those areas looking for their loved ones, and there was a lady who had lost her 7-year-old daughter. For 3 days, she walked throughout the temple, throughout the thousands of bodies looking for her daughter. At the end of the 3rd day, she came across the body of a young girl, and she said to the local Thai police who were running the site at the time, "This is the body of my daughter." They said to her, "Are you sure?" And she said, "Without question." They said, "All right, that's a visual identification. You can take her home." But guess what happened? It was a mistake. You make a mistake in this environment, and it's hard to undo. It's hard to come back from. There's only one conversation I've had on a professional level which is harder than sitting with a family and explaining to them that their 7-year-old daughter has died. The only thing more difficult is to sit opposite that family and say to them, "Yes, your daughter has died. She has been identified. But sadly, her body has been taken by another family. They've now cremated her, and they've spread her ashes on a beach somewhere special to them." You can't undo that. You can't come back from that. So to stop that happening, we had to impose our standards upon the Thais, our standards upon the Indonesians in Bali. We're stepping into a foreign country. We're saying to the local coroner, the government officials and the police, the way that you're doing business, you can't do it that way anymore. You have to follow our policy and our procedures. The reason we were able to implement that change process successfully was because we dealt with the issues of resistance before we sought to roll out the change program. The third thing was to have in place a structure. You can't turn up to a temple where there's 3,500 bodies on the ground and make the process up. You need a structure in place. But one of the things, having spent so much of my working career in the police and in the forensic area, is that we were good at writing policy. We were good at writing procedure. But we overcomplicated things, because the biggest way to make people non-compliant, the biggest way to kill creativity, is to overlay policy and procedure. If you want to take away the leadership, the decision-making power of people within your organisation, just continue to write policy and procedure. And that ties into the fourth thing the Australians did well, was to lead with simplicity. And there's an expectation upon leaders to make decisions without deliberation. If you consult, if you act with good integrity and good intent and you get it wrong, you'll be forgiven. But if you fail to make decisions for fear of making the wrong decision, you won't be forgiven. We had one of Australia's most senior police officers in Bali. He was so fearful of making the wrong decision, he didn't make any decision. We had to bring him back and replace him with someone else. Now, I could talk about those four things in some detail, but I certainly won't do that here right now. If I said to you there was one key thing the Australians did so well in Thailand, I saw it reproduced when I worked in Japan after the tsunami in the Awati prefecture in 2011 by a man by the name of Mr. Sato, was this concept of presence. This exists on three levels. It's around the leadership of the brand that you represent, the team, and as an individual. What that means in our environment and how it plays out is as a leader, there's an expectation you will be present. Because when you're not present, what it tells those that you're working with, when they don't see you, is that you don't understand and you don't care about them. Too many leaders underestimate the significance of their presence, of being with their team when they're facing the challenges. It's insufficient to remain in your office with all of the information, all of the spreadsheets, and be across it all. If you're not seen, they won't believe that you understand or you care. That's what the Australians did so well in Thailand, and that's what Mr. Sato did so well in Japan. In equal importance for me is this concept of clarity of purpose, about understanding why we do what we do. Organisations spend a lot of time and money coming up with a statement of values or a vision statement, and they're effective if there's congruence between what's said and the direction that we're heading. And again, I think this applies on an organisation, a team, and individual level. And you've got to understand as an individual why you do what you do. Following the Boxing Day tsunami, I was on holidays on the south coast of New South Wales with my family. I got a phone call. They said, "Can you head back to work and you head overseas?" I said, "Sure, not a problem." I travelled over and I spent a bit over a month overseas in January and returned in early February. I had some time back in Australia and then I was called and asked to go back. I spent another month overseas and returned home, and I was asked to go back a third time. And when I was going over, I was leading the Australian team and an international team in the identification work, and the significance of that has never been lost on me. But that wasn't why I was going. I went home and I said to my kids, "I'm going back overseas," and Jack's my youngest bloke, and he said to me, "Dad, please don't go." He said, "Why do you go? We miss you when you're gone." So I thought about this and thought I've got to be absolutely clear around why I do what I do. So I got my three kids and I sat them down and I said, "What happened on Boxing Day?" I said, "There was families just like us. Mum, Dad and the kids all on the beach, all having an outstanding time. It was 10 o'clock in the morning and it was a beautiful day. The water went out and it stayed out for up to 10 minutes. And what that did was draw all these people down to the water's edge. 10 minutes after that water went out, it came back in. And in some places, it was a wall of water that was 10 metres high. Now, of those families on the beach that day, there were some mums and dads that survived. There were some kids that survived. But there wasn't many families that survived intact that day. So think about these kids who find themselves alone in a foreign country. How frightened, how scared must they be? Now they'll stay in Thailand until someone helps them return to the country that they've come from. But when they go home alone. Because if mum and dad have died, they're now frozen in a body bag in a shipping container. And that's where they'll stay until we identify them. So where do these kids go when they return back to Australia or back to their home? Where do they go on a special day such as Mother's Day to lay some flowers and have a chat to mum? Because until we identify her, she doesn't go home. Where do they go on a special day such as Dad's birthday? To let some balloons go and have a chat to Dad. Until we identify them, they don't go home. It could be weeks, it could be months. Those of you here today who have young children in your life, be they your children, grandchildren, or nieces and nephews, think about this. You're on that beach with your children and you see that wall of water coming. What do? You grab your kids, you hang on to them with all the strength you've got, and you run faster than you've ever run before. That wall of water catches up. It knocks you over. Now you fight with everything in you to save the lives of your children. But for some reason you survive and your children don't. You spend every minute that you remain in Thailand searching for your children. You go to the hospitals, to the victim centres, to the villages, and to the mortuaries. But there comes a point in time when you can no longer stay and you have to return home. You go back to that country without that most precious thing in your life, your children. And when you get home, you hope every day that someone's going to ring you and say, it's okay, we found them. They're alive. They're in a hospital or in a village somewhere. The common sense tells you that's not going to happen. Common sense tells you your children have died. How do you start to move on from that until you know that for sure? I said to my kids, this is what I do. I go overseas and I help put in place a process that will identify the mums and dads, identify the kids so we can send them home. Now, when we have a hard day working in this environment, as we inevitably do, you have to understand why you do what you do. And for me, it's represented by this little guy on the screen. His name's Alexander, and he's 15 months old. As a dad, every day that this little guy spends frozen in a body bag in a shipping container is too long. I want to identify him and I want to send him home. Now, I started this by saying as organisations we have these statements of values and we have these vision statements and we can say whatever we want. We can say we're the cleanest, we're the greenest, we're the safest. We value our clients, our staff more than anyone. Everyone operates with honesty and integrity, don't they? Because it's written in the statement of values. But how true are you to those? And what is the fundamental thing that is most important to you as an organisation and as an individual? Because when your resolve is tested, if you're clear around why you do what you do, it makes that decision-making process so much easier. Let me tell you about these guys here. These guys here are the Thai Army. And I was working with them at a site When I say they're the Thai army, that's not entirely true. There's actually more than that. What I should say is these guys are from the Thai army. Now, I was working with them at a site called Tata Chai. Their role was to go into the shipping containers, lift the bodies off the shelves, put them on trolleys, and wheel them throughout the site. Now, they work 10 hours a day, they work 6 days a week, and when they finished work each night, they camped in the tents at the site. Some of them had been doing this for 7 months without an end in sight, without returning home to see their families or their loved ones again. They lost their motivation for their work. And how can you blame them? And the lesson I took from them was this: because the loss of their motivation increased the time for them to get the bodies from the shipping containers up to where we were doing the work. The identification, the repatriation, all of that work started to slow because these guys lost their motivation. And the first lesson I took was this: if you have a process in place in what you do and you don't value the contribution of everyone along the way, take them out and see what happens. These guys here performed the least technically challenging role at the site without a doubt. We had forensic biologists, pathologists, police specialists from around the world. But when these guys lost their motivation, the whole thing started to fall apart. And as the leader of the site, I felt responsible for it. So I thought, what am I going to do? Now, the Thai people are incredibly beautiful. They're amazingly patriotic. They love everything about their king, the queen, and the kingdom of Thailand. And at 8 o'clock each morning, they'd stand as they are here now. All the international teams would line up behind them, and they would sing the Thai national anthem before they'd start work. Now, they don't sing their national anthem like we sing ours. You see, they know all the words to theirs. They sing it with passion and motivation. Their shoulders are back and they've got these booming voices. But once they stopped singing, you'd see the physical change in them. Their shoulders would slump forward and then skulk away under the palm trees until I was over there hunting them out each day. And I thought, what am I going to do? So I said to one of the guys I was working with, I said, can you jump onto LinkedIn for me and find me someone who knows how to sing the Thai national anthem in Thai and can teach us? He said, sure. So what we did as the Australian team, we travelled to and from work each day and we learnt to sing the Thai national anthem. This morning we lined up behind them, as we do every day. As they started to sing, the Australians whipped out our song sheets and we started singing the Thai national anthem in Thai. Every one of these guys, their head spins around and they've got this look of amazement on their face. Now, did we sing that national anthem well? Hell no. Did it matter? Not one bit. Did it have the desired effect? Absolutely. If you want to motivate a group of people, you find out what they're passionate about and buy into that with honesty and with integrity. In my experience, people are not motivated by money. Money enables you to do the things you want to do. You want to motivate a group of people, find out what they're passionate about and buy into it with honesty and integrity. I've spoken a little bit this morning about crisis and disaster, but it's not about that. It's about understanding that leadership matters. And leadership matters for absolutely every one of us. It doesn't matter what size organisation you're in or the teams that you might lead or for you as an individual. If there's something about your life that you want to change, you're going to have to do it yourself. And what's leadership about for me? Well, it's about having courage. It's about facing adversity head on every day. I want to show you a photograph of 32 people who I'd suggest are leaders by any definition. You see, I met these kids when I was working in Thailand. Each of them had lost their homes. Each of them had lost their parents. Many had lost their brothers and sisters. And when I met them, they were sleeping in this tent you see in the background. It's a good-looking tent, I grant you that, but it's still just a tent. It wasn't some temporary structure. This was their home. I'm going to share some stories with you on this basis and this basis alone. We can't change what's happened, but we can all change what happens next. I couldn't change the fact that these kids had lost their parents, but it felt within my capacity to do something about what happened next for them. So I set up this organisation called Hands Across the Water. I was still working full-time in the cops. I had no idea how I was going to raise some money, but I thought, I'll give myself 12 months and see how we go. 12 months later, after making the commitment, I went back over to Thailand and I was able to open this home that I'd built for the kids. It's a beautiful home and it's called Ban Tham Nam Chai. And the reason why we were able to build it was because we decided to focus on the results and not the excuses. You know that when you put a new idea on the table, there'll be people who will sit around and tell you why it won't work, what's wrong with it, why it's someone else's responsibility. Be clear about this. If we do nothing, well, nothing will change. Focus on your results, whatever they are. Leave the others to worry about the excuses. There's plenty of people to do that. We built the home 12 months later. It had doubled. The reason why was that too many aid organisations, NGOs, government officials, they turn up and put the flag on the ground and say, we're here to help. 6 months later, though, they pack up their tent and leave. And what message does that send to the community? It says, well, you're on your own. Be it 6 months or 6 years, her parents haven't come back. And of course, they never will. If we want to bring about long-term change in what we do, we need to make long-term commitments. I built them another home and all of the girls moved into this one and they no longer have to share beds anymore. I returned from Thailand on Saturday morning from opening this property, which is our latest property that we've built for kids who have HIV. And this is what they look like inside. They are beautiful homes. They're filled with light and colour, and thanks to the gorgeous staff we have, they're filled with love. Now, the Chinese have a proverb that says, if you want to plan for a year, sow rice. If you want to plan for a decade, plant trees. If you want to plan for a lifetime, well, educate people. I built this centre and we opened it in 2011. It's in the worst affected area in all of Thailand. It cost us 1.4 million Australian dollars to build. It's a childcare centre. It's a vocational training centre. It's a health centre. It fills the gaps that were created in this area. But so much of what we achieve is only possible by leveraging relationships. Those of you who have little boys in your life, you'll know that little boys love to run fast. Little boys love to run real fast, and the appropriateness of the location is often lost on them. Now, this little superhero here was in the race of his life. To be more accurate, it was a race for his life. He held the hand of his grandfather, and they ran from that wall of water that was the tsunami. Run as fast as they could, they were never going to be able to outrun this wall of water. 50 metres in front of them was a building. If they could get there, that gave them the best chance of survival. They weren't going to make it. Granddad got to a tree. He climbed the tree and he dragged this little superhero up to the top of the tree with him. They got to the top of the tree. They were both cut. They had abrasions all over them and they were bleeding. But there was no wild celebrations at the top of the tree. You see, when Granddad was running, he had this little guy in his right hand, and in his left hand, he had his younger brother. Now, when Granddad got to the base of the tree, he knew that if he didn't survive, none of them would. He also knew he couldn't climb the tree hanging on to both of his grandchildren. He had a decision to make. Which one of his grandchildren would he take up the tree, and which one would he let go of? How do you make that decision? How do you decide who lives and who dies? He let go of this little guy's brother. He was washed away, and he did die. Every day since, Granddad asks himself the same series of 3 questions. He's an old man now, so much older than his years would tell you. I saw him last week, and still he asks the same 3 questions. He says, could I have run faster? Could I have been stronger? Could I have made a different decision? The thing is, he had the courage to make a hard decision. And that's what leadership's about. Every one of us here this afternoon will be faced with hard decisions. Thankfully, not too often are they about who lives and who dies. Some of these decisions, be they on a personal or a business level, you'll lay awake for nights on end thinking, is what I'm about to do the right thing? You'll make that decision and you'll spend another number of countless nights awake thinking, is what I've done the right thing? Take comfort, though, in the fact that you had the courage to make the hard decision, because that's what leadership's about. In 2009, I took some people. Some I knew and some I didn't. We went on a bike ride. We rode from Bangkok down to Khao Lak, a distance of 800 kilometres over 8 days. We had an outstanding experience. We raised $174,000 before we went away. And I returned to Australia and I thought, we should do it again. In 2010, we did it again. This time we had 34 people. And in 2011, it had grown where I split the ride into two. I rode 800 k's down with one group, had 2 days off, flew back to Bangkok and rode down again. In 2012, we mixed it up a bit and we started at a place called Nong Khai. And we rode for 800 kilometres down the Mekong River with Laos on one side and Thailand on the other. And we arrived at an orphanage which is called Home Hug in Yosaton outside of Ubon Ratchathani in the Isan region of Thailand. That group finished, I picked up another group and went down again. 2013, we did the same. You can see a pattern happening here, can't you? 2013, we did the same again. 2014, I returned in January from doing it again. We raised over $800,000 this year, and we opened the ride for registration on the 1st of March this year, and in an hour and a half, we had 90 people, 2 rides sell out. What makes it special? Well, it's like anything. It's the people. It's the journey that you get to share, and it's these shared experiences which have seen the success and the growth of Hands. And let me tell you about this beautiful lady here. Her name is May Thil. She is a 56-year-old Thai lady. 28 years ago, she set up a home for children who have HIV or who had lost their parents to HIV. And she heard about our ride and she said, I'd like to ride with you. And she said, the reason I want to ride is so I can stand in front of the children and tell them, don't give up just because you face challenges. Just because the cards have been dealt against you, continue to pursue your dreams. What does she know about facing personal challenges? Well, 10 years ago, this beautiful lady was diagnosed with terminal pancreatic cancer. She was given 6 months to live. How is she still alive today? It's a bit of a mystery. 3 o'clock each morning before we get up and ride, she wakes up and goes through this detox routine and washes the tubes that hang from inside her out. She drains them out. She gets on the bike and she rides 100 kilometres each day. When we pull into the hotel at the end of the day's riding, no one complains that what we've done has been too hard. No one complains we've ridden too far or it's been too hot. No one really complains about much at all in her presence. She kind of takes away the excuses. I think there's 3 levels in which we develop the people we work with in our organisations. One's around professional development. That's why you invested a couple of days to be here today. The second is how you look after your staff and your teams from a social welfare perspective. The third element, though, is the one that I think we spend the least amount of time and we make excuses and we let it go because we're busy. It's taking time to feed your soul. My question to each of you here this afternoon was, when was the last time you did something? It was truly food for your soul. For me, riding 1,600 kilometres through Thailand every January with people like this is food for my soul. But what is it for you? If you want to learn to sing, if you want to trek through Nepal or head to Paris with the person that means most to you, now's the time to do it. Don't wait until the time is right, because that time might not come. If not now, then when? If not you, then who? Now, the reason why the charity they run is successful, the reason why the bike rides they run is successful, and they are, it's because of the experiences. If you want to build engagement within your workplace, within the teams that you're with, engineer shared experiences. Too much time and logic is spent in boardrooms or conference rooms talking about engagement. Engineer shared experiences. Who here today has teenage boys that spend more time on Xbox Live talking to kids they'll never meet than sitting around the dinner table talking to you? Who has teenage girls that spend more time on Snapchat or Facebook than they do sitting around having conversations? It's up to you to engineer shared experiences. From a consulting point of view, how I make my living is build corporate social responsibility programs on the back of creating shared value. If your CSR program is about donating money, corporate philanthropy, or giving staff one day off a year, you're missing the opportunity. If it's not a profit centre for you, you're missing an opportunity. Create shared experiences, create shared value. I get to do these bike rides with my kids, and I love it. Every year we're there as a family. And my dad, who's on the left-hand side of the photo as you look at it in the blue shirt, he's long retired. He's certainly not a bike rider. He's long retired. And his life consists of two things. One is he plays golf, and two, he plays bowls. He lives on the mid-north coast of New South Wales, and that is his life. When he's not playing bowls or golf, he's complaining about playing bowls or golf. That is the sum total of his experience. When I told him I was setting up this ride, he said, "Do you think I could come?" I went, "Yeah, all right." So I gave him this job. His job was to drive at the back of the rider's pack in the car to make sure we didn't lose anyone. Now picture this. He's driving an average of 100 kilometres per day, an average speed of about 20, 23 kilometres an hour. And he's following, he's staring, he spends his day staring at the backside of plenty of men who are dressed in lycra, and let me tell you, many of them should not be. Now, he's not a man blessed with patience. And to top it off, and in the early years, Jack, he was my young bloke, he was only 12 when we started these rides, and Jack and I would often be at the back of the pack. We'd leave a water stop and we'd see everyone disappear, and Dad would be right up our backside in a very encouraging way, trying to get us to ride faster. And if there's any bike riders here, you'll know when I say there's nothing more intimidating than cars driving right up close. You don't need to be that close for us to know that you're there. So we pull into the first water stop, and I go, "Dad doesn't understand what's going on here." So I explained to him, I said, "You need to give us another 5 or 10 metres. Just drop back a little bit." I said, "You'll still get there at the same time, but just give us a few more metres." He said, "Sure, not a problem." We're back on the bike, 50 metres up the road, Dad's right up our clacker again. I speak to him at the next water stop, and this continues and continues. Over 2 years, this goes on. And we get to the point, and I've had enough. I'm so worried that if one of us falls off our bike, he's going to run us over before he knows what's happened. So at the end of the second year, I said to him, "Dad, I've asked you so many times. I've pleaded with you. I've told you, don't drive so close. You continue to drive close. I said, next year you cannot come." And it's a big thing for me to make this call because I love shared experience. I love seeing him there with his grandkids. I love sharing the experience. Actually, I didn't. He was a pain in the ass most of the time he was there, but anyway, he was there. So I give him this news, so he reacts as you would expect a mature 70-year-old man to do. He goes back to the mid-north coast of New South Wales and he sulks. For weeks on end, I don't hear from him, and it is bliss. Then he rings me. On the 1st of April, and he says, "I bought myself a bike." So at the age of 74, he takes up bike riding. And he starts at Southwest Rocks doing these little loops. And then they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then he comes over in 2012 and he does the whole 800 kilometres as a 74-year-old. And to get to share that experience with him was pretty special. But get this, day 6, the hardest day on tour. It's like running a project. Three quarters of the way through the project is where the energy drops. Day 6 is that 3/4 of the way through for us. We're too far into the tour to remember why it's special. We're just that little bit far from finishing to be buoyed by the enthusiasm and the spirit of what's about to happen. If you're sore, if you've got bruising, people have got chafing in places I shouldn't know about. And this is the day that it hurts. It's a long day on the bike and there's a few hills. And everyone's quiet on day 6. It's a different feel. And I pull in after lunch. I'm in the water stop and having a drink. And all of a sudden I hear this commotion. And I go, I know exactly what's going on. And we're sitting there, and I hear him coming through, and I go, oh, look out. He comes up to me, he's in a mad fluff, and he says to me, now, you're in charge here, right? And I said, yeah. He said, you're going to have a word to these blokes driving the car. Do you know how close they are to me? Absolutely true story. I get asked to take on lots of projects all around the world, been asked to go into places like India, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, the Philippines earlier this year, and different areas of Thailand. We can't take on every project that comes our way. Business growth has to be sustainable. A bit over 4 years ago, I had a phone call from May Thill, the first time I ever spoke with her, and she told me about the orphanage at Home Hug. She told me about the children who were dying. And they were dying not just on a monthly basis, but on a weekly basis. And they were dying from HIV-related illness. And that shouldn't happen anymore. If you have HIV, you should live for another 50 or 60 years. It's not the death sentence it used to be. HIV is no longer a medical problem. It's one of poverty. But these children continued to die. And they shouldn't. And the lesson I took from being up there was that you can't continue to do the same thing and expect a different result. Whether it's in your personal relationships or the way that you do business, you can't just do the same thing and hope for a different outcome. What May Thill was doing was amazing. She had dedicated her life to these children. But doing the same thing would see the children continue to die. Something needed to change. I want to leave you with some photos of the children that I've spent the time with, those children from up at Home Hug. And you'll understand why I do what I do. Bring the volume up.
The sunshine brighter for you, and I will even play the fool if it makes you smile. I'll try to make you laugh. There's a tear in your eye. After all is said, after all is done, I'd do anything for you. Come near, close your eyes, hold my hand, it'll be alright. Don't be scared, don't be shy. Lift your head, it's gonna be alright. I'll try to make the stars shine brighter for you, and I'll take you on my shoulder, hold you way up high. I'll even chase the rainbow high in the sky, 'cause after all is said, after all is done, I'd do anything for you. Come
met those kids just over 4 years ago, and when I met them, they were dying on a monthly and weekly basis. Since we took responsibility for that centre in March of 2010, not one child has died, and that's the way it should be. Since I set up Hands, it'll be 10 years next year. We've raised over 10 million Australian dollars. We've never spent 1 cent of donors' money on administration or fundraising, and that's the way it should be. We can't help everyone, but we can all help someone. It's been an absolute pleasure to spend the afternoon with you and to be given the honour of closing the conference for you. I'll leave you with 2 things. Never miss an opportunity to give your kids a hug, no matter how old they are. Never miss an opportunity to tell someone very dear to you that you love them. Thank you.